Greetings, everyone. Greetings, everyone. I will call to order a meeting of the City of Wilsonville Budget Committee on Wednesday, May 18th at 5 p.m. and ask the City Recorder to please call the roll.
Member Fitzgerald.
Here.
Member Ackervall. Here. Member Lehan.
Here.
Member Linville.
Here.
Member West.
Here.
Member Moulton.
Here.
Member Skull.
Here.
Member Ham. Member O'Neill.
Here.
Member Russell.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
Mayor, Sean O'Neill here. I move to approve the order of agenda.
Thank you. Motion has been made. May I have a second, please?
Second. Second.
Motion has been moved and seconded. All in favor of the agenda as presented, say aye. Raise your hand, aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion passes.
Excuse me, Member Fitzgerald. Could I get an identity on who seconded the motion? We're not able to see everybody, so if we could have that audibly, that would be so wonderful.
Councilor Lehan seconded.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you. So that's a good point. So let's follow the example from Member O'Neill, and just for everybody's sake, when you speak, just say your name, and then whether you're asking a question or whatever it is, then everybody will know. Thank you. So I will start by, again, as I mentioned, thanking all of our citizens for volunteering for this position, and we appreciate this. And I will ask you to now go around and introduce yourselves. And I see Member O'Neill is at the top of my screen, so if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Mayor. My name is Sean O'Neill. I'm a small business owner here in the city of Wilsonville. I have a law firm. It's been here for about 8 years. I've been a lawyer for 32 years. Our family's lived in Wilsonville for 14 years. And we have we're in that process of having a preteen about ready to go to middle school next year. So our hands are full.
Oh, yeah. Okay, thank you. And next is Member Moulton. I can't hear you. Oh, there. That's getting a little
better.
Yes.
Okay. My name is Alicia Moulton. I moved to Wilsonville just a year ago. I live here with my husband and my 4-year-old daughter, and I am the budget manager at OHSU.
Thank you. And I just remembered I'm going to back up because I forgot to ask you to, I think we need to ask Member O'Neill and Member Moulton if you could talk about when you joined the Budget Committee, because some just joined very recently and others.
Sean O'Neill again. Sorry, Mayor, I forgot. This will be my second year on the Budget Committee.
Thank you. Member Moulton.
And this is my first year on the Budget Committee.
Thank you. And we'll move to Member Russell.
Hello, I'm Cynthia, she, her pronouns. I work for the Oregon Secretary of State Audits Division. I've been doing that as financial auditor for about 7 years. I've lived in Wilsonville about, I think, like 5 years or so. This is day 2 on the Budget Committee. Very new.
Thank you. And Member Skull.
My name is Sam Skull. My wife and I are 10-year residents of Wilsonville, and I was a general manager for Gaylord Industries in Tualatin, but recently retired here in April. And this is my second stint on the Budget Committee. First was in 2017, and now this is the second time that I've been on board since January.
Thank you. And let's see, actually, that covers it because Katie Ham is excused tonight and she has another commitment, but she is definitely committed to watching this on YouTube. So we know we'll have at least one viewer. And with that, that brings us to the next item on the agenda is the election of the chair. And so this item is going to be led by our city attorney, Amanda Guile-Hinman, and she will serve as our parliamentarian of the Budget Committee. And I just want to say, feel free to ask questions about the procedure. I do it all the time. So thank you, Ms. Guile-Hinman.
Thank you, Mayor Fitzgerald. So to begin tonight, the Budget Committee will elect a chair subject to the following rules. We will begin with nominations for the chair. Historically, the Budget Committee selects a community member to act as chair, but this is not a requirement. Any member of the Budget Committee may nominate another member to serve as chair. Members may also nominate themselves. Nominations do not have to be seconded. If you are nominated but do not want the position, you can simply decline the nomination. When the nominations stop, I will call for any more nominations, and when no further nominations are forthcoming, I will declare the nominations closed. Once the nominations are closed, I will read the names of the nominees. We will do a roll call vote of the Budget Committee where each committee member will vote for one of the nominees. If one person receives a majority vote, I will declare the result of the vote. If no one receives a majority of the vote, you all will re-vote until one person receives a majority vote. No nominee may be dropped from consideration unless that nominee decides to withdraw from consideration. Upon completion of election of the chair, that person will preside over the remainder of the meeting. So with that, I will call for any nominations for the chair of the Budget Committee. Member Skoll? I think you're muted.
I would like to nominate Member O'Neill.
Member O'Neill, do you accept the nomination?
I was about ready to move for him to be chair. So I will, I'd like to nominate Mr. Skoll as chair, if we could all consider him because of his experience as well.
Okay, I have member.
But I do accept the option. I do accept that, but I also think we should respect Mr. Skoll's experience as well.
Okay, thank you, Member O'Neill. Member Skoll, do you accept the nomination?
Yes.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, I see no further nominations, so I will declare the nominations closed. The two nominees are Member O'Neill and Member Skoll. So when we do the roll call vote, please identify whether you are voting for Member O'Neill or Member Skoll for the chair position. And Paula, can we do a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Member Ackerval.
Appreciation to you both. I'll vote for Member Skoll.
Member Lehan.
It's usually not a hard decision, but here it is, a hard decision. I will vote for Member O'Neill.
Member Linville.
It is a difficult decision. Usually we don't have two people we can even get to do this. So I will cast my vote for Member Skoll.
Member West.
I vote for Member Skoll.
Member Fitzgerald.
I vote for Member O'Neill.
Member Moulton.
I vote for Member Skoll.
Member Skoll.
I vote for Member O'Neill.
Member Russell.
I vote for Member Skoll.
And Member O'Neill.
I vote for Mr. Skoll.
Thank you. Member Skoll received a majority of the vote, so Member Skoll, you'll be presiding over the remainder of the meeting as chair. Thank you.
Thank you all for your confidence in your vote.
And you are now running the meeting. And you've got Amanda Guile-Hinman as your parliamentarian.
Thank you. Thank you. And I start with attachment A here with the opening statement. Correct?
I think you got to approve the minutes first.
Yep, so the next thing on the agenda is the approval of the minutes, and so everyone knows, because there are new members, even if you were not present at the prior meeting, you can still vote on the minutes.
And I was looking down, I didn't notice we had this nice agenda on the screen either.
Yeah, so we just need a motion to, I think, approve the minutes, and then we can go into the public hearing. There's 2 public hearings tonight.
Right. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes from the previous budget, please?
Mr. Chairman, this is Member Linville. I move to approve the minutes of the previous meeting.
Do I hear a second?
Mr. Chair, this is Sean O'Neill. I issue a second.
Thank you. The minutes for the previous meeting are now approved, and we can move on to the public portion of the hearing.
Member Skoll, can we get a vote on that motion? If you just call for a motion on that, or a vote on that motion.
Okay. Then could I get a vote from all members on the motion for the minutes?
Favor.
Favor. Aye.
Favor.
Aye.
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 The motion for the previous minutes passed.
And then, Chair Skoll, I think you're now at item 5 on that procedure document.
That's the attachment A. Item 5. Okay, so I start with the call to order.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, I call to order the Wilsonville Budget Committee public hearing on the proposed uses of the state shared revenue as reflected in the City of Wilsonville fiscal year 2022-2023 budget. This public hearing is to comply with ORS 221.770. Holding the hearing is required in order for the city to participate in the distribution of state shared revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in the following manner. 1, staff will present their report. 2, testimony by proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed use of state shared revenue. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. A time buzzer will go off when the 3 minutes are up. Item 3, after all community members wish to speak, have testified, staff will have time to provide any additional comments to the committee. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held remotely by Zoom. Information regarding how the public could attend this meeting remotely and give testimony is posted at City Hall and was also timely published in the Wilsonville Spokesman and is also posted on the city's website shown on the screen. Notice was given that testimony could be submitted for the record in advance in writing by emailing or mailing it to the city recorder. If you are listening to this meeting remotely, when the time for public testimony is called, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom and press 9 on the telephone, or press 9 on your telephone if you would like to testify. If you prefer to have and have not already done so, you may also submit written testimony by email at any time before the public hearing is closed by emailing the city recorder at the email address now being shown on the screen. Any testimony sent by email will be read into the record. Please include your name, mailing address with your email testimony. If you're having difficulty with these instructions, you may call the number shown on the screen and enter webinar ID number, the ID number shown on the screen when prompted. When called up to testify, state your full name, address and address for the record. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that has already been given to the City Council. Simply indicating you agree to the prior with the prior testimony given by a speaker you identify is sufficient. Is there anybody wishing to testify?
And Chair Skoll, I think we're going to go right into the staff presentation for this part.
Okay.
And then we'll get into testimony if there is any.
Thank you. Now the staff will present the reports.
Thank you. Good evening. Welcome to the Budget Committee meeting. I'm Catherine Smith, the city's Assistant Finance Director. First up tonight is state shared revenues. ORS 221.760 establishes eligibility for the city to receive state shared revenues if the city provides 4 or more of the following services: police, fire, planning, street construction, maintenance and lighting, sewer, storm, utility services. The city provides all but fire meeting eligibility. These are revenues collected by the state and dispersed based on population to municipalities. State shared revenues anticipated and budgeted for fiscal year 22-23 include most notably gas tax. Budgeted at just over $2 million, this is our single largest state shared revenue source. We just received our April payment, which confirms a consistent slight upswing versus April last year. The next 3 are general fund revenues: liquor tax at $500,000, state revenue sharing at $380,000, and cigarette tax at $25,000. ORS 221.770 establishes the process for the city to elect distributions of these funds, including enacting resolution and by holding a public hearing allowing for public comment. And that concludes the information I have on state shared revenues. Any questions?
If not, we could close the hearing.
If there's no questions for staff, then we will ask if there's any public testimony. So it looks like there's no questions for staff. So is there anyone if there's anyone on the Zoom who would like to provide some public testimony, you just need to raise your hand, and we're getting a shake no. So Chair Skoll, it looks like you can close the public hearing now.
Okay, so the hearing has no further requests. The public hearing on proposed uses of state shared revenues as reflected in the City of Wilsonville fiscal year 2022-2023 budget is now closed.
In the next order, Mr. Skull would be opening the hearing for the proposed budget.
So that would be attachment D, correct?
Yeah, correct.
I call to order the Wilsonville Budget Committee public hearing on the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2022-2023 proposed budget. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. The hearing will be conducted in the following manner. As a courtesy, members of the public have the option to provide public testimony on the proposed budget before the staff presentation begins in order to accommodate those citizens that do not want to wait until the presentations have been made to speak. Community members may elect to wait to testify until after the staff presentations have been completed. Public testimony is limited to 3 minutes. A time buzzer will go off when the 3 minutes are up. Testimony will be provided as follows: by proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed fiscal year budget. Staff will present the reports. Additional public testimony will be allowed in the same order: proponents, opponents, and those neither in favor nor against the proposed fiscal year budget. After all community members who wish to speak have testified, staff will have time to provide any additional comments to the committee. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being held remotely by Zoom. Information recorded regarding how the public could attend this meeting remotely and given testimony is posted at City Hall and was also timely published in the Wilsonville Spokesman and is also posted on the city's website shown on the screen. Notice was given that testimony could be submitted for the record in advance in writing by emailing or mailing it to the city recorder. If you are listening to this meeting remotely, when the time for public testimony is called, please use the raised hand feature in Zoom or press 9 on your telephone if you would like to testify. If you prefer and have not already done so, you may also submit written testimony by email at any time before the public hearing is closed by emailing the city recorder at the email address now being shown on the screen. Any testimony sent by email will be read into the record. Please include your name, mailing address with the email testimony. If you're having difficulties with these instructions, you may call the number shown on the screen and enter webinar ID number the webinar ID number shown on the screen when prompted. When called up to testify, state your full name and address for the record. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that has already been given to the City Council, simply indicating that you agree with the prior testimony given by a speaker. I hope I have that straight. The speaker you identify as sufficient. At this time, is there anybody wishing to testify?
Chair, it looks like we don't have anyone identifying as wanting to testify, so I think we can go into the staff presentation.
Okay. Hearing no further requests to testify, the city manager will kick off the budget presentation with the budget message followed by staff presentations.
Thank you, Chair Skull. I assume everyone had a chance to read the budget message, so I won't rehash what you've already read. In the interest of time and getting to Keith and Catherine's presentation, there is one item, however, that I do need to bring to your attention. We had, since the budget was printed, we were notified by our printer that does our Boones Ferry Messenger that, like everyone else, they're dealing with shortages, and so we had to include additional money in the line item for that budget. And Keith has the figures, but I think it's an additional $30,000 or $40,000 that we have to add. We hope that they're looking for comparable paper to what we had before. So the hope is that we can get that back down to what it was, but we're budgeting additional resources in the off chance that they aren't able to do that, so that we don't have to do a supplemental budget down the road. So happy to answer any questions about the budget message. And as we go along tonight, staff is here to answer any questions that you have. I did want to thank those members who emailed in questions. I hope you all received your responses. I believe you did, and that the rest of the budget committee was copied. So happy to answer any of those questions before we dive into the presentations. And it's back to you, Chair Skull.
Okay, with that said, thank you, and then we will move forward with the presentations.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Skull. Yeah, we can take it from here. My name is Keith Katko. I'm the city's finance director, and with me tonight, whom you just already. Yeah.
Oh, hold on. Hey, Keith.
Yeah.
We have a hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Councilor Ackerwall has a question. Sorry.
Okay. Already.
Sorry to be disruptive there. I just wanted to confirm, so this adjustment that may be needed for the printing, I recall from previous years that usually at the end we get a final kind of revised version, and I'm guessing that as well as any other changes that arise will be included in this final version that we see, so we can have a view of all the details too.
Yeah, I believe at the end of the presentation tomorrow, someone will have to make a motion to amend the budget as proposed for that additional amount for the Boones Ferry Messenger. And the Budget Committee is, of course, free to do that, make those motions, and then that gets referred to the City Council for ultimate adoption.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'll handle that motion tomorrow. Okay, so yeah, like I mentioned, I'm Keith Katko. I'm the city's finance director, and with me tonight is the city's assistant finance director, Catherine Smith, whom you just met doing the state shared revenue public hearing that we have to do. And together tonight, we'll be leading you through the budget presentation, and we will also have the department directors who, when they get to their respective programs, will also come up to add context to their programs and where their programs are really headed. As you may have noticed, we slimmed down the budget book this year down to 369 pages from last year's 396 pages. The quickest route, as Brian mentioned, to understanding the budget is, of course, in the budget message. We kind of create the budget message, and I think I'm kind of dating myself now, but we kind of created it as the Cliff Notes version of the budget. So this budget book is a policy document, it's a financial plan, it's an operational guide for the city, it's a communication device, and it is also a 5-year crystal ball projection. And this proposed budget actually is really the first year of that 5-year forecast. You'll find the complete 5-year forecast in the back of the budget document in the appendix section, and in tonight's presentation we'll have snippets of that included when we talk about the various funds, so that'll be on tap for presentation. And with the budget overview tonight, I just have 8 slides to share, which is meant to be really a high-level presentation, which should illustrate and illuminate the major changes of the budget from last year. Please stop me anytime along the way, raise your virtual hand, or wave even physically, and I think Zoe will be able to capture that. Really, we'll just kind of have a dialogue as this thing unfolds, so feel free to ask any questions at any time. Once we finish the budget overview, we'll roll right into the CIP program in kind of the same thing. We touch on it at a high level. We'll bring up the city engineer to provide additional context, and then thereafter that we will do we will do 2 departments tonight, Public Works and Transportation. So we can roll right into kind of the fund overview. This is kind of the first context, just to give you some context to what's happening with the city. The city, of course, uses fund accounting, which is different than other accounting systems perhaps you may be accustomed to in the private sector, which generally focus on profitability. Fund accounting at the city focuses on accountability in tracking resources really for their intended uses. Every fund at the city has its own budget, has its own story. The city has 24 funds. Total all city funds combined budget is $285,059,238, and in the next few slides we'll deconstruct that. And that number really is the total of all resources, including reserves. With governmental budgeting, we have to budget for everything, including our fund balances. The legal level of control within each one of those 24 funds is the program expenditure level, and that's what all the department managers will come up and talk about. That's the finance department, the HR department, the library, the police department. That's the legal level of program control, along with capital project budget, along with debt service, and along with contingency. So within each fund, those groupings are the level of control.
I think I'm seeing that Member Russell has a question.
Sure.
Are you sharing your screen right now? I'm not seeing any slides.
Oh. Let me see. I thought I was.
I wasn't sure if that was on my end or if...
Okay, let me see.
Yeah.
Sorry. Down here?
So hit share and then hit your screen again.
Okay. This one.
Yep.
Okay, maybe that's a little bit better. You don't have to look at me. You can look at the screen. So that's the budget overview. And there's that massive number, 285 million, and we'll deconstruct that, as I say, as we go forward here. This is, I like this slide. This is really kind of, I think, the financial skeleton here of the city. As I mentioned, we have 24 funds, 11 operating funds, 7 SDC funds, and 6 capital improvement funds. Operating funds are really where the muscle and the meat of the organization is. That's where the day-to-day operations of the organization are expensed. They pay to keep the lights on, to pay the salaries, provide the services, and whatnot. So I listed all 11 operating funds and their major revenue source. Of course, the general fund is our main fund. The main source of revenue for the general fund is property tax, and on down the line in that respect. This slide also kind of presents how there's movement of transfers between the funds. The capital improvement funds generally are zero balance funds. When we have an expense, we track our capital projects in the capital projects funds. When we have expenses in there, the expenses are, the accounting system will either fund those expenses through transfers from operating funds or SDC funds. SDC funds are the system development charge funds that are assessed on development in the area to increase capacity of either streets, parks, the sewer system, the stormwater, or the other ones mentioned on the screen. A lot of times a capital improvement project will have multiple funding sources that may include sewer operating funds as well as sewer SDC funds. So that's how the kind of flow of dollars, and those get expensed, and they're part of the transfers out budget in the city's budget. With capital projects as well, our engineering department and our community development department is able to, they track their time on capital projects, and that money then flows to reimburse the community development fund for the services they provide in project managing the capital projects. So it's a way of recapturing the costs for the time spent on planning services, engineering services, and community development in the city through the Capital Improvement Project Fund program. That's kind of the budget overview, and now we can kind of, we'll just go forward into the budget a little bit more. As I mentioned, total resources for the city budgeted are $285.1 million, and we'll see that as well in total expenditures. The resources will match the expenditures. This pie chart shows how the $285 million is broken out by percentage. Of course, the largest portion of that $285 million is beginning fund balance, followed by all those interfund transfers that I mentioned there. Anytime we move money from one fund to another, it has to be budgeted. So from that, we're going to kind of look just at how the budget has changed from year over year. These are the major resource categories listed here, the dollar amounts of the budget, what the budget was last year, and the percentage change, and then I'll talk a little bit about what's new on any of them. First up, property taxes. We expect a 7% increase, which is a little bit higher than normal. As you may be aware, and I'm not going to get into this, the complex background of the various measures of property taxation in Oregon, so don't worry, but they are, with Measure 50, we're limited to a 3% increase in assessed value every year. So in general, for property taxes, you'll see a 3% increase year over year. However, of course, the city is growing. We have the Frog Pond development, and we have numerous still commercial and residential buildings being built in the city, so there's a growth element additionally. And tomorrow, when we talk about urban renewal, another factor, what is happening is we are on a trajectory in this current year, in fiscal year 23, to close down at least, or reduce the tax increment we're collecting on one of the urban renewal districts, the year 2000 district. We're basically dialing back the tax increment that we are collecting for that district, because for that district, we almost have the bonds, outstanding bonds, completely paid off, so we don't need to collect as much tax increment in that urban renewal district, so we've reduced it a little bit, and by reducing it, that money flows back into all the various taxing jurisdictions in the area, including the city. So we'll see an uptick because we're dialing back on that urban renewal tax increment. So that's a little bit of a preview to tomorrow's discussion when we get into urban renewal, just enough to let you know that we do expect a little bit of a bump in the property taxation for next year. And when we do eventually close that district, which is actually the following year, we'll see another larger bump. So that's what's kind of going on with property taxes, and that's all flowing into the general fund. Other taxes the city receives, of course, are the transient tax, which is the hotel motel tax, budgeting $360,000 next year. We get the gas tax that flows into that line item, as well as transit tax, which we expect about $5.6 million, and that's all going into the transit fund. That's of course is a 0.05% on payroll earnings within the city to fund SMART. Generally, we're seeing a little bit of bump up, but we've just aligned the budget to trending actuals. We're seeing increases across the board, so that number has gone up. Licenses and permits includes a variety of things. In the general fund, it includes the franchise and right-of-way fees, business licenses. It includes the building and CD funds, the permitting and the engineered permits. What's new is we are anticipating building permits up next year, as well as CD permits. Intergovernmental revenue is a huge number next year, $20.1 million. Of course, what's in that number includes the $8.6 million that we're anticipating to receive from the city of Sherwood as their contribution when we get into the CIP section of the $24.3 million water treatment plant that we are building next year. That'll be one of that is the largest CIP next year. Sherwood will be paying for a third of that. What's new is the ARPA money that the city will be anticipating to receive next year, probably early part of the year in July or August. City's expecting another $2.7 million in ARPA funding, as well as the city's SMART department will also be receiving 2.0 in ARPA funds for next year.
Councilor Linville has a question.
Oh, go ahead.
Councilor Linville.
Mr. Katko, I just wanted to request that, especially for our new members and for our citizens, that we're careful about the acronyms that we use. And some people might not know what CD means. And ARPA and some of the other acronyms that we use. And so I think it would be helpful to, as we're talking about those, I know it's easy to roll it off the tip of your tongue, but I think for everybody it might be a good reminder. Thank you.
Point taken. Yeah, I apologize for that. We tend to get marinate in these financials all year long, so I'll try not to use the acronyms. The ARPA money is, I'm not even actually sure of the spelled out version because it gets referred to as ARPA so often. It's the American Recovery Policy Act or something. It's a congressional act that was passed to help communities respond to COVID-19. It basically was a congressional act. Forget the exact name, but we'll get grant funding from it.
It's the American Rescue Plan Act.
Thank you.
and CD is community development.
Thank you. Mr.
I
Cosgrove.
see we do have a hand raised, Member Russell.
Mr. Kaka, we have a hand up from Member Russell.
Hello. I'm not sure, have you done any planning yet on, I'm not entirely sure how it works with municipalities, on if you'll need to have additional audit services as a result of receiving the ARPA funding?
Yeah,
I know a lot of that is more of a higher risk type funding.
No, we'll have an audit. Anytime we receive more than $750,000 in a year, we get what they call a single audit. So we normally fall into that classification every year thanks to Transit. Transit is the recipient of generally at least $1 million in federal funding every year. So we do get that audit, which will then cover the whole city on the use of federal funds, and they come in here and make sure that we are using the funds appropriately and we have all the internal controls and all the other litany of responsibilities that come with taking federal funds. So yeah, we'll get a single audit. In June, next month. Well, our auditors will come in June, and then they really audit us all year long, but particularly over the summer as we close our fiscal year end this June. So that's... I
do have another related question, I suppose, related to audit services. I don't know if you've had these conversations yet, but my understanding is City of Wilsonville's auditor, Marine & Co., is no longer going to be providing audit services. So I don't know if that goes out to an RFP or if how long that contract goes through, or if there's been any talk or consideration on that.
Yeah, correct. They decided to get out of the auditing business. We were at the tail end of a 5-year contract with Marina anyway, so every 5 years we typically go out for RFP, and we have already done that and gone through council and have selected a new auditor, Grove Mueller, LLP, auditing CPA, independent CPA, who come in and they look over the city's finances, the internal controls, and will do all the audits that are required of the city. We'll have a financial audit, we'll have a federal funds audit, and in Transit in particular is subject to a couple other additional audits that will be covered by our auditors. So one of the other main sources of resources for the city, $27.7 million are course charges for services. Those are largely the utilities that we collect, the water, sewer, stormwater. Currently, the city is at around 7,000 customers now. And that $27.7 million also includes, of course, we sell water to the city of Sherwood, so there's about $1.6 million in Sherwood revenue in there. There's also the city charges for administrating the urban renewal district, so that's what is also in that number. What's up is generally utilities. The city's growing. Like I mentioned, we're up to 7,000 customers now, and there is a 3% water increase each May, and that last one is in May 1st of 2023. That is reflected in that number. Oh, so system development charges, these are the one-time charges on development in the city. The system development charge rate is pegged to a construction cost index, so that those fees are anticipated to go up in July. And from what I understand, we're factoring in that rate increase as indexed to the construction cost index over time in the next year, because as you are aware, or you may be aware, many of the inflationary indexes, the consumer price index and the construction cost index, are up double digits. So in order to mitigate that a little bit, there's a phased-in approach to that rate increase for SDC next year, but it does reflect that as well as continued growth, particularly over in Frog Pond. So anticipate collecting additional STC amounts. Our investment portfolio, the city, of course, follows the ORS investment policy. What we're seeing, we are seeing higher rates, of course, particularly from last year and the year before, where rates were almost zero in some of the U.S. Treasuries that we were purchasing, or like 0.005. It was crazy. Right now, we invest a large chunk of the city's money with the state investment pool. That is earning a 0.75% interest, and additional amounts we invest in U.S. Treasuries, commercial paper, corporate debt, and some of that we're seeing up to almost 3% earnings now on an 18-month U.S. Treasury, which is quite nice. We should help our investment portfolio. However, as noted up there, there's two things happening. We are incurring higher interest rates, but our burn rate of cash probably will dip down a little bit as we fund these. We've got 3 large capital improvement projects next year that we'll talk about when we come up here to the capital improvement projects that will be demanding of some cash. So that's what's happening there. Just jumping down to interfund activity. This is what all that is all about, is the overhead transfers into the general fund for overhead. This is money coming in, it's resources. The general fund charges other funds because all of the central services for the city's administration, the HR department, the finance department, and the legal department are located in the city's general fund. That money, or that expense does get costed out to the other departments, and it comes back by way of revenue reflected here. Also, the CIP funds for CIP funding, this is what's also reflected in this number here for interfund activities. Again, it's just the movement of funds from one fund to another on the revenue side. When we get to the expense side, you're going to see the exact same dollar because the funds are offsetting each other.
Councilor West.
Mr. Kako, we have a question from Member West.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Kako, thank you so much. You're doing such a great job breaking this down. I just have a quick question on the investment revenue. As we start to see the Fed increase rates and some of this market maybe change, will that increase the savings and investment potential for the city? Isn't it my understanding, as you see interest rates raised and sometimes some of those savings rates also get better? Or
oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so and we have no idea what that's going to look like because it's all in flux right now, am I right? But I'm guessing the savings rate, I guess I see in the last couple of years, 2.8, 1.4, gradually has gotten, lower and lower.
Right.
Is it reasonable to say that we might see it climb back the other direction here pretty soon? Oh,
definitely, and it is. The cost of borrowing is going up, and that's the offset of the savings. When we talk about debt, the debt we incurred, I could talk about the interest that we're paying on the debt, but on the flip side of that is the investments we're earning. Like I mentioned, the U.S. Treasury rates for a 3-year, we're limited by our city policy and by the ORS, because we've adopted the state ORS policy for our city policy, for 18-month window of investing. And like I mentioned, the U.S. Treasuries for an 18-month is right around 2.8, I think, right now. So that's what we can earn. We put a good chunk of our money in what's called the LGIP, and that's kind of the savings account that we hold with the state. That's got a lower rate, but it's more fluid. We're able to access that money a lot quicker, and that rate right now is at 0.75. So yeah, anybody's guess on what interest rates are going to do. The Federal Reserve raised the rate, I think it was 0.5 2 weeks ago. You look at the stock market even today, it's going crazy. Nobody knows what's happening exactly with the cost of money necessarily, and having reverberations all throughout the economy. But I think the interest rates will continue to rise, and it should bump up our investment revenue.
So, Member Kako, I have a question, and I'll circle back to one of your earlier resources, the license permits and fees. With that said, you have a 13% increase there, and you were mentioning that you're expecting new construction, new permits in the coming year and everything. How confident are you with that based on the cost of money and rates going up? Do you think that those permits will slow down?
Well, when Chris Namsu, our Community Development Director, comes up here, I think tomorrow night, he can talk a little bit more of that. But what he sees, and development has not slowed in Wilsonville at all. The Frog Pond residential area, certainly on track for increased development in houses, as well as, in anticipating development in the city, it's really hard to look out more than a year. But at least for the year ahead, we see some definite activity continuing.
Thank you.
Loan proceeds, we don't anticipate any loans going out in fiscal year 23. You'll see that $23.4 million in loans from the prior year. That's this current year we're in. As you may remember, we went out for a bond for the Public Works complex that we are building next year. So we secured debt financing for that at a rate of, I think, 2.25%, and that we wouldn't be able to secure that type of loan currently, as I mentioned, because the interest rates are going up. The other part of that loan proceeds from last year, we did go out for debt for a $7 million bond related to the water treatment plant expansion. Of course, as I mentioned, and we'll talk about this more in the CIP, that project is funded in part by the City of Sherwood and in part by the City of Wilsonville using STC funding as well as water operating funds. And by going out for that $7 million, we're able to preserve some of our SDC funds for other water-related projects that we'll need to incur. And we also secured a loan in the low 2% for that loan as well. So this kind of wraps up all our city resources. And you may remember we met back in, I think it was January or February, where we went over where we anticipated we were going to end the fiscal year in June. We need that number, because that's what this beginning fund balance is. That's our estimation of the current year's ending balance. That becomes our budgeted fund beginning balance. So we anticipate collectively ending with $135.9 million, and that collectively becomes our beginning fund balance to equal our total resources of $285.1 million. In the next few slides, we'll go over the requirements of that, how we're spending that or how we're saving that, that amount, because as I mentioned, requirements have to match resources within the city. The largest portion of that $285 million requirement will be just left in contingency. 8.2% is spent on personnel services, which is wages and benefits. Another 9.2% are the materials and services. 1% is for capital outlay. 28.4% is for our CIP program, which we'll get into, and then 1.9% is related to debt. Similarly, what we did for the resources, we'll go over quickly year-over-year changes. For requirements, of course, we're going to look at fiscal year 23 over fiscal year 22. We have an 8.9% increase in personnel services. What's new? In the budget this year is we are proposing an addition of 7.25 FTE. Most of those will come out of the general fund, includes an IT project manager, an HR assistant, facilities maintenance specialist, an arts and culture program coordinator, and a 0.25 Parks and Rec intern. And when we speak of an FTE, we're speaking of somebody who's working 2,080 hours, so any proportion thereof, like a 0.75, is a proportionate share of that 2,080 hours. Transit fund includes 2.25 FTE request for drivers for a Clackamas County route that they are developing, which will be grant funded or actually covered by the state transportation infrastructure funds that transit receives every year. We're anticipating about $2 million in receipt from the state. That STIF money is, you may be aware, it's assessed on every employee in the state. It's a 0.001 charge on every employee across the state. Part of that gets allocated back to SMART because they provide transit services.
Mayor Fitzgerald.
Mr. Kaka, we have a question for Member Fitzgerald. There you go.
Thank you, Chair Stoll. My question, I think I know the answer to it, but I'd like to ask you to go over it again. When we have discussed adding a behavioral health specialist to work with our Clackamas County, out of our contract with Clackamas County Sheriff's Department, is that personnel that we've talked about that we're planning to add going to be in that category of the budget?
No,
I'm sorry, City Manager. That's in contracted services.
Contracted, okay.
Yeah, and that would be under basically the sheriff's contract. They're basically adding that to that police contract, and they will coordinate directly with Clackamas County Behavioral Health.
Right, okay, good. I just wanted to bring that up because we're adding someone there, but it shows up in a different place.
Correct.
Thank you.
So that's kind of the difference of the 7.25, and of course, like every organization and entity throughout the state and probably the country, we face certain recruitment and retention issues, and so I'm sure it'll be a challenge for the HR department this year in recruiting this level. But this is what is on tap for the personnel services, and when that rolls into our materials and services, which is, as Brian mentioned, all the contracted services, as well as all the supplies for the city. Of course, the city's top 3 contracted services are the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, and we contract our police force through Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. The combined 3 of those represent about 49% of that overall materials and service budget. And when we get down into the department budgets later today and tomorrow, we'll get a little bit more nuanced. We'll get more nuanced in the personnel services and the materials and services for each one of those departments. Again, I'm really just speaking about the aggregate level here. Capital outlays, anything over $5,000. What we're looking at generally are transit replacement buses, and it will be a couple buses in there. Public Works has a vacuum jetting truck of $316,000. This is all actually a carryover from the prior year, and as this is in the case with the transit vehicles, a lot of this specialized vehicles, the lead time has become extraordinarily long, so predicting which actual budget year it's going to fall into has become a little bit tricky. We expense it upon delivery, so the vacuum jetting truck was really approved in this current fiscal year, but it's going to have to be carried over because we don't anticipate it coming until next year. What's new, the Parks and Rec Department and the roads are proposing to purchase a bucket truck for $175,000. And of course, Delora, when we talk to Public Works, can talk a little bit more about the need for that. We are adding, as you may have saw back on personnel services, a facilities maintenance specialist. So we'll need a facilities truck a specialized truck to align with that new person. And of course, in the capital outlay includes a myriad of water treatment equipment and wastewater treatment plant equipment. Parks Maintenance also has 2 vehicles they're desiring to purchase, and the fleet service has $126,000 in replacement vehicles. The way our fleet department works here, when any department buys a vehicle, from that point forward, that department is assessed a fleet charge, which includes the charges for oil change, gasoline, as well as a replacement component for the eventual replacement of that vehicle 10 to 15 years out. So when we buy a new vehicle, we are costing out to those departments the future replacement of that vehicle. So the fleet charge there of $126,000 are planned replacements of existing vehicles that have cycled through their life here at the city. And we sell those vehicles on the state surplus, and our fleet manager, Scott Symington, does actually a pretty good job of auctioning those vehicles and earning some residual income on the auction of those vehicles. So that...
Mr. Kako, we have a question from Member West.
Hi there, quick question. When you talk about, so like a vehicle that it takes forever to deliver on, does that money get set aside or earmarked even though it's not part of the current budget year, or does that come out of our current budget even though like we don't know when it's going to be delivered? So is it hard to kind of anticipate an expense, or do we kind of hold those funds for when we finally get it delivered on?
No, we have to rebudget for it. We don't hold budget over, you can't hold budget over year. So if it doesn't come this year, we're kind of in a bit of a pickle. It needs to be rebudgeted because we can't outflow the funds from the city without a budget. So if we've budgeted it in this current year, anticipating it's coming before June 30th. If it doesn't come, we got to rebudget for it in accordance with state law next year. Of course, there's contracts involved with the vendor. They're going to make sure they get their payment regardless of whether we have the proper budget authority, but we need to go get the budget authority essentially too. There's kind of a parallel thing going on, but basically we have to rebudget it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but there's just, especially with buses now, they're so complex, and the lead time, and there's only, as I would imagine, a few places nationally that make buses, and they're backlogged, and labor shortages, part shortages. I'm sure we've all heard those, but so it's created some long lead times. So it gets down to the total operating budget, and this is what kind of I consider, or we've considered in the past, really the total cost to run the city, $52 million. We talk about that $285 million overall budget, but in terms of what it really costs to operate the city, this is the number that we generally state. So we're looking at about a 7.5% increase in our total operating budget for a $52.5 million. Of course, right below that, and you can see a really big number there, is an 81.1 capital improvement budget. So I won't spoil it too much because we're going to get into it in the next slide, but one of the larger capital improvement budget programs we've had in a very long time, probably ever, 81.1 million. Debt service, what's new? We have 3 bonds. We have 3 debt bonds outstanding. One is a legacy from, I think, 2011 when we did a major rehabilitation of the city's wastewater treatment plant. We still have $22 million in debt we're paying off on that loan. That interest rate on that loan is really low because we refinanced it a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago. It's about 1.5% loan rate on that. And as I mentioned, we took out a water treatment plant loan of $7 million last year, as well as the public works complex of $16.5 million. So now we have the debt service on those to deal with. Interfund, as I kind of mentioned, matches the resources, get us to an ending fund balance of $79.4 million, which is the ending fund balance collectively of all those 24 funds. We can go to the next slide, see how it's broken out by fund. It'll leave us with a $12.7 million general fund ending fund balance. Historically, we've done this thing where we say, what fund is on the watch list or whatever. Really, every fund we have here is on our watch list. We're watching every fund to make sure they're in particularly good shape. One fund this year particularly is the Community Development Fund, just because of the cycles of development here in the city. We have really high years followed by really low years, so we tend to watch that fund a little bit more, but they are still relatively healthy at $1.6 million. And that concludes that portion of our overview. But again, we're going to go into the departments here, and then you'll get a deeper dive and a more nuanced dive when we go into all the program budgets. So we can go ahead and just move on forward with our capital improvement program. And I do have Zach Weigel here too to answer any specific individual questions on any capital improvement project that you would like to talk about in detail. We have 119 capital improvement projects. We're going to go over them one by one. No, we're not going to go over them one by one. Just to kind of highlight what's going on, as I mentioned, you saw the $81 million city CIP program there. But when we talk about our capital improvement program, we also include the overhead and the urban renewal in our discussion here, and that's what really jumps up the capital improvement program this year to $101 million capital improvement program. But we can deconstruct that here shortly, and I'll tell you, there's really three big projects that are the lion's share of this $101 million. As you see in this slide, 92% of that capital improvement program is related to construction projects. No surprise, any of the big construction projects throughout the city. We also include master plans, SDC reimbursements, livability improvement, annual maintenance is included in the capital improvement program, as well as some miscellaneous projects. A big part of our capital improvement program is the funding equation. And as you can see in this slide, the lion's share of funding for our CIP program, our capital improvement program, is from system development charges. For next year, 29% of the funding will come from the system development charges, which are levied on new development to increase capacity of existing infrastructure within the city. Remaining fundings will come from the operating funds. For instance, if it's a sewer project, it may come from a little bit of the sewer operating fund as well as the sewer SDC fund. The third largest chunk of it is coming from urban renewal. This has been just a fantastic tool for the city over the years in allowing the city to build infrastructure and finance the infrastructure within the city. We have two of the districts winding down, but 17% of next year's CIP program is funded through our urban renewal. The loan proceeds you see up there, 15.9, that's the largely the public works complex debt financing incurred. The intergovernmental revenue would be the money we're expected to receive from the city of Sherwood. The general fund kicks in a little bit of money for capital improvement programs throughout the city, and then we get to that $101 million funding. As I mentioned, 119 projects. It's really 61% of the CIP budget is 3 projects. Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
It's audio.
Oh. Did I lose my audio?
Oh, we lost our audio, yes.
Oh, okay.
Give us one moment and we will work on our audio for those of you on Zoom.
I did the whole thing and I didn't hear a word of it. I got to restart. I don't have enough voice left. We got it back or no?
We're reconnecting. It didn't drop, but it's not connected. Like the phone thing is gone, but this thing says it's on. So you're gonna try to dial in? Yeah, I'm gonna end it and then I'm gonna reconnect.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound. You entered 8908. This meeting ID does not exist.
I don't know what it's doing.
Maybe we just tell them we'll have a 5-minute break or something. Should I just write it on there? 5-minute break?
I got rid of the chat feature.
I could write it and hold it up.
Oh, great idea.
Do you have a pen?
Yeah.
What time is it? Will we reconvene at 7:15?
Sure, we can try that.
Yes, 7:15 sounds
So it's like it dropped on the Zoom side because the phone was still connected.
good. Yeah. But I don't know what to do on the Zoom side. It's just like,
You can't chat with them via the chat.
I got rid of the chat because it caused problems.
Can one of them chat? If one of them puts into the chat, can they chat with each other?
You can hold it up in front of Keith's camera.
Oh, can they read that, though?
You have to move it all the way up.
Oh. 5-minute break.
I'm texting Brian right now.
7:15, and we'll be back at 7:15. Welcome back. Appreciate the break, and sorry for we had a little bit of Zoom problems. I think we are solved now and back ready to go. We were talking about the CIP budget, 119 projects, but as I was talking, and I'm not sure where I cut off, I think it was just right here, but if you need me to go back, let me know. It's really three big projects. The $25.9 million water treatment plant expansion, one of the biggest projects the city's undertaken. The Beckman Dip Bridge project of $20.3 million, and the Public Works Complex, which is a $15.9 million project. Altogether, that's $62.1 million and makes up 62% or 61% of that $101 million budget. We kind of always throw this slide up because people ask us, how do projects get on the list? It's mainly a function of three items: health, safety, and welfare of the city, and the annual repair and maintenance replacement obligations that we have with our existing infrastructure, as well as the CIP projects come out of the master plans, which really create the future planning decisions for the city up to 20 to 50 years out. So they're all, the infrastructure needs are born in the master plans, and then they will also originate out of yearly council city initiatives. Are we not online, or, I'm sorry. Oh, we have a question. Okay, sorry.
Sorry, it's Councilor West again. Is this where the Kiva building that we were talking about in the last council meeting, is this where we'll see this? I know that an update's going to come. We talked about that, but I was just wondering where we would be able to find it in the budget.
Yeah, there's a couple projects related to that Kiva building, and when Laura comes up, we can talk a little bit more. There's two things going on. There's an immediate need in the Kiva building with there's a roof problem, and that is coming to City Council by way of a supplemental budget in June, because that has to be taken care of immediately. But in the CIP program budget next year, and we'll get to it in a couple slides ahead, there are some additional project costs related to both the Kiva and the Art Tech building. So it's in the CIP program, and I'll get to that on the next few slides. Because we're going to go through the CIPs. Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have more questions? Okay.
Well, I was just going to say, for the Kiva building, those details, we will have color commentary on what those are when Ms. Kerber comes, right?
Yeah, I think that is fair. She knows the most about it. She's been living it for a couple of weeks here, so she can give us an update on that. Maybe in the next few slides, we're going to get to that area of the city. Traditionally, we've broken out the city in 4 quadrants here, and we've explored the capital projects that are happening in that area. The first area we look at is the northwest quadrant of the city, which is the area north of Barber but west of I-5, and this has a cluster of projects, including as they're color coded by which type of project they are. You have the regional Park 7 and 8 at Villebois, and we have the Public Works facility, $22 million project over 2 or 3 years, flagged here. Transit building over on Boberg will have some security upgrades, as well as in this area of the city, we are proposing in this CIP program to include what they're calling a transit-oriented development project, and that's at there's a 1.5 acre site right there in Smart Central, that parking lot area where this project is proposed to be built. Next year is early project management related to the project, and the project has actually been funded through, or will be funded through, a $1.9 million allocation from the state of Oregon. So that is kind of the main cluster of projects in the northwest quadrant of the city. And if there's any questions, particularly on any of those, we have Zach here, our city engineer, to address any of those. And Dwight Brashear can also talk about the transit-oriented development project later tonight during the transit department section if you have specific questions about that. So we'll move over to the northeast quadrant of the city, and that's east of I-5, north kind of town center, where we really have a mixture of old and new type projects. We have what we call a priority 1B water improvement projects, and that's really to deal with some aging water infrastructure issues. And then some of the newer projects include the Beckman Creek Regional Trail, Frog Pond planning continues, and you can see that yellow border out there. That represents the urban growth boundary of the city, not yet annexed into the city, but the yellow highlight is the urban growth boundary, and that's where major residential development is slated or is in progress. And of course, Beckman Road improvements, as well as the Beckman Dip Bridge project, is located in this part of the city. And that will shift us down to the southeast quadrant of the city, where we have really a variety of parks, facilities, stormwater, sewer, water projects, all kind of mixed up in here. And this is where you'll see the Art Tech project, or one of the Art Tech projects. As I mentioned, this project is a $300,000 renovation of the Art Tech Kiva building in terms of bringing it up to ADA compliance, doing some interior work on painting and flooring throughout both the Art Tech building and the Kiva building. And as I mentioned, Delora can talk a little bit more about that, or if you have specific questions you'd like her to address now, we can have her come up. Also in this quadrant of the city, we're doing an architectural review of the police station renovation. When we build the Public Works complex, Public Works Administration is going to move out of that building. I look at it across the street here, which is really, from my recollection, the old City Hall. That once Public Works moves out of the building, police will be the only occupant of that building, so we'll need to renovate that building. We're bringing in an architect to kind of look over the whole building, and that is included in that project. Also in this quadrant of the city, we're going to have a City Hall roof repair project. There's a library wayfinding project, and of course the Town Center Plan implementation planning project. We'll have Memorial Park Master Planning implementation, which really is a collection of ongoing projects: ball fields, tennis court resurfacing, athletic fields, about $250,000 in investment in that project. And then, of course, across the river in Charbonneau, there's a litany of water, sewer, and stormwater in particular projects that are on tap for next year. In the final section of the city, the southwest quadrant, here we'll have a couple parks projects: the Merrifield Trail update, Brown Road improvements, that's an urban renewal funded project. And of course, the big one for the city is the water treatment plant expansion, which will bring the city up to capacity from 15 MGD to a 20 MGD plant of taking in water and treating it for the residents, which will provide for the long-term growth of the city. So that is kind of a speed through of all the projects. Again, if there's any one in particular that we'd like to discuss, we could do that now with Zach, or if we want to talk about the Kiva Art Tech building, we can wait, and Delora will come up very shortly when she talks about Public Works. So,
Mr. Kaka, we have a question from Member Russell.
Hello. This is kind of a broad question about, I guess, kind of all of the projects. So I'm just curious, and it's possible this is somewhere in the materials that I haven't gotten to yet, because there's a lot in the budget. But I'm just curious what kind of eco-climate friendly considerations are part of the plans for, new buildings or renovations, or what kind of green building standards are being used for those.
Do you want to talk about the...
I was just going to say that's a good question to ask of Ms. Kerber when she comes up.
Okay, we have two things on tap for her. We'll talk about the Kiva Art Tech building, and of course she'll talk about the Public Works Complex building that is subject for next budget year. So we'll leave that for Delora. Any other kind of ancillary questions on any of the sewer projects, water treatment? If not, we will.
I can't, Mr. Katko, I can't see the, on my screen, the legend very well of the project type. And so what is the red?
The red is
a street?
Yeah, it's street. And you can see in the southwest quadrant, it's really, well, the big one is Brown Road improvements. And that's actually the last remaining West Side Urban Renewal District project. Is that correct, Zach? And do you anticipate that being completed next year?
No, that one will actually start design next year. So over the next 3 years, that project is planned to be completed.
In Brown Road.
I'm just wondering about down at the bottom of that slide where it says French Prairie Bridge.
Yeah, there is a budget for French Prairie Bridge.
And it has a red dot, and I don't recall seeing that in the document.
It's in there.
Yeah. So that project, we created a set-aside account for setting aside street SDCs for that project in case there's grant funding that becomes available or coordination with ODOT on advancing the French Prairie Bridge project. So the red dot it includes streets and bike ped, anything transportation related.
Okay, thank you.
We have a question from Member Fitzgerald.
Thank you. So we do have, that project has been discussed for many years. The cost of it is probably very high. It's moved different places. And currently, and I would ask Mr. Cosgrove to add into this if he would like, but ODOT has come under a set of requirements to make sure that they have bike ped facilities on major improvements that's kind of an overview. And so if things keep going along as they seem to be with ODOT, that may be where that French Prairie Bridge comes from. But because we have money set aside, would that be for us to do some of the further design because their idea of where it would go may be a little different?
So I guess I can take a stab at that. I guess yes and no. That money is set aside for coordination with ODOT, advancing the project. There's ongoing coordination with ODOT about incorporating that into the Boone Bridge project. So I don't know, Brian, if there was more you wanted to add.
No, that's what I was going to say.
Thank you.
We have a question from Member O'Neill.
Along those lines, and maybe I just haven't kept up, the last conversation was it was going to allow for access for emergency vehicles. Is that still a part of the design equation, or have we moved beyond that?
That's still part, I mean, that was included in the planning work that was done a few years ago, and that, I believe that is still the plan to make that redundant.
Question from Member Ackerball.
Thank you. This is kind of just a general question about the presentation of the material. So So I think you mentioned that the budget book has slimmed down to a 300 and however many page, considerable thickness document this year. But charts and maps like this, I feel, are really helpful in getting kind of a high overview quickly. And I noticed in our budget document packet, I'll try and hold it up to the camera. We have these pages where it shows, for instance, all the streets projects, all the waters projects, right? So it's kind of like if we're looking at this map, all the quadrants together, but just filtering out for each colored dot, as I understand, and labeling it with the project CIP number. But I really like the one that we're looking at on the screen because it kind of gives us a view of all of the different sorts of activities that are happening in one area. And I think oftentimes our community members, this might be more of the view that they have what's happening in their neighborhood or things that they're driving past, what's going on there, what are they doing. So I love this chart, and I'm wondering how we can make it more accessible to our public as a way for them to get a quick kind of snapshot of our budget and the work that we're doing. And not everybody is going to be able to go through the lengthy budget document to to pick out this information or flip through all of the different streets projects only or water projects only or things like this. And the capability of being able to zoom in on different quadrants would be quite helpful as well. Maybe that's something we already have on our website, but I just kind of wanted to give that feedback.
Yeah, it's something that we could excerpt out of this budget document and make a space for it on our website. Somehow I'd have to work or talk to Dan Stark, our GIS manager, as well.
Yeah, on our projects page, we do have a map that shows current projects. It doesn't really show planned projects, so we could, there's some information where you can zoom in and see that includes all capital projects and private development projects.
Okay, I see. Yeah, just some feedback from me on. I like this chart. I feel like it helps kind of give a big overview quickly. So thank you.
We try to do the best of both worlds. In the budget document, as Councilor Ackervall stated, we break out the CIP projects by functional area. So there's the water, there's the sewer projects. Each one has a separate section of the CIP budget in a separate map listing all those water projects on that map, where so we've tried to just kind of, with this, for the visual presentation, we've tried to do this quadrant and we just cluster them like that. Because a lot of times in any one CIP, there'll be a water, sewer, and a street CIP all in one, within that. This year, not necessarily that case because we've got a lot of disparate kind of CIP projects, but in general, that's usually the case. But so, yeah, that's good.
I think that level of detail is appropriate for the budget document, but just trying to think of ways that we can get this information more accessible to the general community members too. Thank you.
We have a question from Member O'Neill.
Follow up on Member Archibald's line. Have we ever put this in the Boones Ferry in our newspaper or put it on social media? Because this imagery is helpful to share beyond making people go to the city's website. Often people sometimes, they default to what we get in the mail and also on social media. I'm just wondering, something like this would be extremely helpful to get the message out.
Yeah, definitely. I'll touch base with Bill Evans, our public relations manager who manages the Boones Ferry Messenger, and see what kind of creative ideas we can come up with.
We have included project updates in our annual report to the community, but these graphics weren't part of that, so that's something we can incorporate into that annual report. I'm confident that we haven't sent out graphics like this via social media, but there's no reason that we couldn't or shouldn't. So good suggestion. Thank you.
Any more questions? All right, Mr. Kako, I think we can move on to the next element.
Okay, just one final, I think there might be maybe one or two more slides. The other part of the capital improvement program budget is the master plans and studies that we'll be doing next year. And we broke it here out on this slide by planning, water and wastewater, stormwater and parks. Of course, in planning, the Frog Pond planning continues. Basalt Creek up by the prison area, the area between Tualatin and Wilsonville, that area continues in planning. The town center concept planning, just getting started, and we have a climate action plan under the planning cluster, and so on down the slide here. I won't necessarily read them all, but we just have stormwater master plan updates, and we have a wastewater treatment plant master plan, or two of the bigger ones that we will be embracing next year, as well as a Parks SDC study. So if anybody has any questions on any of those master plans and studies, we have Zach here can address any of those. And then that wraps up the CIP portion of the budget. But as I said, we'll have Delora come up here next who's really going to go over her program budget, the public works budget, but she can address some of those earlier comments about the Art Tech building as well as the public works complex building. First, though, we'll turn it over to Catherine here, who's going to get us started, get us in the framework for that, and then we'll have Delora come up.
So next we have our department presentations. Thank you, Keith. Up tonight is Public Works and Transportation. First, we'll have the department directors give a brief overview of their departments, followed by the format illustrated here for each of our department budget presentations. Altogether, it tells the story of how we get from the fiscal year 21-22 amended budget to the fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget. By having the department directors here, it's also a great opportunity to help answer any questions the committee may have. Before we begin the department presentations, a few comments for all departments. Personal services, we've budgeted a 2% COLA and/or COLA as per existing labor agreements. We've also budgeted an increase of 10% for health insurance. In the past, this has been pretty conservative. Again, this year, we don't anticipate rates to exceed this amount. Materials and services across the board, employee development is budgeted to return to pre-pandemic levels. And liability insurance is anticipated to increase by 15 to 20%. The first step tonight is Public Works, which consists of administration, facilities, roads, street lighting, water, sewer, and stormwater. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Public Works Director Delora Kerber.
Thank you. Good evening, Budget Committee members. Delora Kerber, Public Works Director. So we're just gonna, let's see. There we go. Oops, wrong way. A 50-50 chance on that one. So Public Works oversees the operation and maintenance of the city infrastructure, and more recently we've actually taken over responsibility for facilities repairs and/or construction. We're responsible for the oversight of 9 of the budget funds, not including capital improvement projects. Our staff is on call 24/7, 365. So if there is any issues or concerns or emergencies around the city, staff is at the ready to address those. This year, in 2021, each year in May, they have a National Public Works Week recognition, and this year's theme was Ready and Resilient. What I think really summarize is a good explanation of what my department does, is we're ready and we're resilient. So, one of the things that we do is asset management, the preservation of the city's assets around the city, within the city. We track the number, the type, the condition, as well as what work has been performed on any city asset in our software. And recently this year, we received the High Performance Operations Award from Cartograph. That is the software that we use for some of our innovative uses of the software in tracking our assets around the city. Also with assets, we've recently launched a closed circuit TV program to be able to better look at the condition of our storm as well as our sewer pipes, and that is going very well. So, as I mentioned, Public Works Administration, we do all sorts of things, and more recently we are doing the oversight of the repair and or construction of facilities around the city. As we had talked about, that there is, here at City Hall, there was a water line break, a leak rather, in the lunchroom, and so now we're in the process of reconstructing the front desk, both upstairs and downstairs of City Hall. And so Mark Montavo, operations manager, he's overseeing the reconstruction of that portion of the facility. We also are doing building our new Public Works complex, which you can see up here on the slide. So there were some questions about, and I'll just share with you the questions about energy or sustainability. And so for this Public Works complex we sat down and we took both the best criteria of the LEED certification as well as Green Globe. We created a specific checklist for this project, and as we went forward with design, we were incorporating sustainability into the construction of this site. We won't necessarily get a quote LEED certification, but we are meeting the intent of what it is for sustainability of new construction. Additionally, all throughout the buildings, be it in the admin building or the warehouse, is we're doing building automation systems, which is a great way to be very efficient with both your electrical usage as well as your that have to do with your heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems. And last is it's a requirement of the state of any new building is to have 1.5% of construction costs put towards green energy technology. And for this particular project, we are putting solar panels on the warehouse in the middle of the yard there. So those are a couple of the elements that we're looking at. I wasn't sure if there was any other questions related to the Public Works complex.
No, I think that was it. Just the art tech.
Art tech, well, okay. Well, so the last one, as I said, we most recently are overseeing some of these repairs and replacements. And so one of them having to do, and we talked with council on Monday, is about the roof truss structure at the Kiva building. So there is we call it the Artex complex or campus, which is two different buildings. There's the Kiva building and the Art Tech building. And that is what we consider the campus. And of the one building, the Kiva building, which I believe used to be Old Church Sanctuary, is the roof structure is failing. And so we are going to go in there and basically rip off the roof, remove the old trusses, bring in new trusses, rebuild the roof to get that building back up to standard for use. Currently it is closed to anybody being able to go into that building. But in conjunction with that, before the whole roof truss issue came up, what we are looking at is how best to use the Art Tech campus. And one of the primary uses will be ability for the Parks and and Recs Division to be able to expand their programming. As we were doing, and they alluded to, we were doing a facility master plan, and we recognize that the Parks and Recs, or the community center more specifically, is limited on what they can do with that building if they would like to expand any of their programs. And so the Art Tech campus is most likely, it's just next door to be able to use that, as well as was mentioned, Wilsonville Community Sharing will be temporarily located in the Art Tech building while they're waiting to move to their more permanent location. So, were there any additional questions with the Kiva or Art Tech campus? All right, well then I'll just keep going. So in addition to overall administration for Public Works, the other piece is that we are in charge of emergency management. And so that means that if there is, and we've had a few over the last couple of years, be it smoke or snow or COVID or I guess, probably something else that I'm missing, is that our department will mobilize and take care of the situation. And this year, actually, council had assigned us 2 additional council goals having to do with helping coordinate with other emergency response agencies so that we are all on the same page as to what's happening amongst us in the region, and then also for us to do an education program for the community to help them get better prepared. And that's where Wilsonville Ready is up and running. We are working on various different campaign programs. One of them is each month that there's a new topic in which there is preparedness information. I believe coming up in June is going to be pet preparedness. So we post information on the city website as well as in the Boones Ferries Messenger and social media. All right. Another area that we address in Public Works is facilities and grounds. We have over 43 public buildings that we maintain, 2 of the interactive water features. We have in-house janitorial services, which has really helped us to pivot to be able to take care of issues quickly. And with the addition of the Art Tech and the Kiva building, as well as 4 parks facilities and a couple more restrooms, that is one of the reasons that we are seeking to be able to add a facilities maintenance technician and their associated equipment to help us better continue to maintain the city facilities.
We have a question from Member Fitzgerald.
Okay.
You're on mute.
I'm sorry, didn't unmute. Just a quick comment again on Member Russell's question about green strategies, that as we discussed, our council goals guide these expenditures. And so later, when you want to do some more reading in the 300 and some pages, on page 196 under the council goals, number 7 outlines some green strategies. And so you can take a look at that later too. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Another area of Public Works has to do with roads maintenance. This is where we are taking care of the maintenance of the roadway system from basically along the whole road. We do pavement repair, we do sign repair and replacement, holiday decorations, road landscaping. All of those items are one of the reasons that we are seeking to purchase an articulating bucket truck that will best help us to be able to perform those functions. We will be sharing the cost of that truck with parks. Roads will pay 60% and parks will pay 40% of the total cost. They will likely use it mostly for a lot of tree trimming and other functions like that in the parks. We'll also be able, our facilities department will be able to use that. What we did find recently is that we've been able to borrow a truck here or there, but it's getting a little bit more challenging. We believe having our own truck will really help the efficiency of our crew. So in addition to just general day-to-day maintenance items, this is the group that when there's inclement weather, they're the ones out there sanding and de-icing, as well as plowing the snow if need be. All right.
Question from Member O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, and it's more informational for me. On Town Center Loop, the sidewalks and the green space, the green area between the street and some of the businesses, is that a city responsibility? And I'd like to have a follow-up question once I get that answer.
Okay, so the way the city code is currently written, it is the maintenance of the landscape area as well as the sidewalk areas, the responsibility of the adjacent property owner.
Okay, and so something like the Fry's sidewalks in front of Fry's and the bushes that are going way into the sidewalk, keeping people with disabilities from walking safely down the street, that's the property owner's responsibility. Is that my understanding?
That is correct. And so that's where we engage our code compliance official to be able to work with the adjacent property owners to address those concerns.
Okay, thank you for that.
All right. So street lights is another area. There's over 3,000 street lights that the city owns, and Portland General Electric maintains them on our behalf. We are in the process of converting our high-pressure sodium and mercury vapor lights over to light-emitting diodes, or also known as LEDs. These LED lights are dark sky compliant. They're 300 Kelvin color, which is a nice, more warm color, as well as we've added 7-pin adapters so that future technology, if we choose to do controls on them, we are able to. We completed phase 1 of our conversion back in February of 2021, where we did like 933 Cobra heads were converted. Those were mostly on arterials. We are currently in the process of doing phase 2, where we are now going to convert 813 either shoebox or decorative, and decorative could either be an acorn-shaped light or a town and country light. And these are conversions are happening on collector roads and or in neighborhoods. And we expect this work to be done by December of this year. And then phase 3, which will convert the remaining lights within the city, will happen at a future date. What we're doing is we're starting to aggregate up our savings from the first 2 conversions to be able to have enough funds to be able to do phase 3 conversion. All right, water treatment and distribution system. So we talked a little bit about that already. The city is, we have our treatment plant, which is currently the 15 million gallons per day capacity, and we are looking to expand it to 20 million gallons per day capacity. We share that with Sherwood. And then in fiscal year 21, we produced in total for both Sherwood and ourselves 1.985 billion gallons of water. So that's a lot of water. So once the water leaves the treatment plant, it goes into our distribution system where it flows forth within the city 137 miles of public water pipe. We have 4 reservoirs in which we are able to hold the water until it is needed at a future date. We also have in our city 8 ground wells that we hold in reserve. They are not connected into the distribution system, but we hold them in reserve for emergency purposes if need be. So conversely, you have sorry.
We have 2 questions, both at the same time. We'll start with Member Russell.
Hello. So I don't know if this question is for you. In terms of water intake, I know we're increasing the amount of water that we can take in our process. Since quite a bit of the state is facing a severe drought, and while that may not directly impact us, is there anything that the city is doing to, like any water conservation policies that are in place or being considered considered or anything like that?
Well, as part of the next year's capital improvement plan, there is a project called Water Conservation and Management Plan. Maybe I got that backwards, Management and Conservation Plan, of which where we do identify various things that we can do to help conserve water within the city. As far as we're concerned, our water rights on the Willamette are they don't have as many restrictions as some other agencies. And so if there were to be such a severe drought that would impact our ability to use our water permit, they have a curtailment plan in place of how we would address any reduction in being able to pull water off the Willamette.
Member O'Neill?
I have a question. I see that we have to flush the system occasionally where they release water onto the streets, I guess through the fire hydrants as part of that necessary maintenance. And I didn't know if there's any safety protocols on that, posting signs. I mean, I walk the loop every morning, and occasionally that has to be done, and there's no sign warning, at least for pedestrians, and a heads up to cars. I see a sign out there giving some warning that they're doing this flushing on the road, or which sometimes goes over the sidewalk. And I'm just wondering if there's a policy in place that they're supposed to do that. Thank you.
Yes, so typically what happens is we put out A-frame signs around the neighborhood letting people know that we are performing flushing activities. So I mean, without knowing
well, if I can talk, well, I'll be specific. A sign saying we're doing it, but not alerting pedestrians and drivers that it's actually happening, where water's going in full force across sidewalks into the street, to me is an immediate hazard, that there might be a better opportunity that the person that's doing that to put some warning signs that's actually in progress as opposed to it'll happen. So I see that sign in our neighborhood. There's no indication when it's happening, and I'm more focused on seeing it on Town Center Loop where there's a lot of traffic and people that use that, and water, there's no warning signs. So I'm just throwing that as a suggestion maybe to think about.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll move on to sewer collection and treatment. So we produce the water, it goes out into the community, and then we get it back again through our collection system. And here we have, so we collect it through 88 miles of sewer pipe around the city, and then we have 9 lift stations, which are located at the various low spots within the city, in which to be able to pump it up to the elevation of the wastewater treatment plant. As part of that program, we also have the industrial tree pre-treatment program. That addresses working with industries and businesses to help prevent anything that we don't want to come down the wastewater lines to the treatment plant. So we have 8 different discharge permits for industries. We have another 8 best management practice permits with industries. And then also we work with 98 different food service establishments on helping them to curtail their fats, oils, and grease, which can clog up the collection systems. And then once it gets to the treatment plant, we have our design capacity of our treatment plant is about 4 million gallons per day. We work with Jacobs. They are the day-to-day operation and maintenance of the treatment plant on our behalf. And in 2020, we treated 766 million gallons of wastewater. All right, so the last area that we take care of is having to do with stormwater maintenance. We have like 2,500 catch basins out and about in the city, and we try to get around to cleaning at least a third of those each year. We have 10 detention ponds and miles upon miles of swells and ditches in which that we maintain. Complementary programs that we have for the stormwater is our street sweeping program, which they sweep every street in the city at least once a month. And then bike lanes, they will actually sweep twice a month. And then also we have our Adopt a Road program where volunteers take over up to, we have 40 different sections along various arterials, and our volunteers clean those areas of any litter that they may find up to three times or more per year. And if you know of anybody who's looking to volunteer, we still have spaces available. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. Okay. Anything else? Oh, you want that back?
Any further questions?
Thank you.
Okay.
Next, we will move on to the budget slides for Public Works. First up is Public Works Admin. This includes no change in FTE and a net 2% decrease in requirements for fiscal year 22-23. A net decrease in materials and services, as illustrated here, is in part due to supplies related to COVID-19 mitigation, which have been acquired, and funding which can be reduced, bringing them from a fiscal year 21-22 amended budget of $986,000 to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $965,000. Any questions? Next, facilities. This includes an ad package for a full-time facilities maintenance specialist. And materials and services includes an operating budget for the operation maintenance of the Kiva and Artec buildings. Capital outlay also includes an ad package for the addition of a pickup, bringing them from a fiscal year 21-22 amended budget of $1.4 million, an FTE of 9.75, to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $1.7 million and FTE of $10.75 million. Next, roads. Materials and services includes increases to professional and technical services due to a rising cost to provide funds for contracting landscape work in high visibility roadway areas, and increases in utility services related to irrigation of landscape along roadways. Capital outlay also includes an ad package for an articulating bucket truck, as Dora mentioned. The cost of the vehicle is split 60% to roads and 40% to parks, bringing them from a fiscal year 21-22 amended budget of $943,000 with an FTE of 4.6 to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $1 million. Again, no change in FTE. Street lighting. There are no positions funded for this program. As such, this work is contracted out to PGE. In total, we anticipate a 5% increase in requirements, bringing them from a fiscal year 21-22 amended budget of $384,000 to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $401,000. Water distribution. Materials and services. We conservatively budgeted for an increase in banking credit card fees. However, of note here, we're changing providers and have negotiated a lower exchange rate. With the implementation of our new utility billing system in September, we anticipate fees to therefore decrease. Keeping this in mind, we've budgeted here conservatively to budgetarily allow room for growth as we continue to promote payments via credit card. In total, we anticipate a 4% increase in requirements for fiscal year 22-23, bringing them from a fiscal year 21-23 amended budget of $1.6 million to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $1.65 million. No change in FTE. Water treatment plant. Starting with personal services, because the water treatment plant is operated under contract, the budget does not contain a personal services category. The employees who operate the plant are employed by Veolia North America. Materials and services includes an increase in supplies due to the rising cost of chemicals needed to process drinking water. Annual contract increase. There's a line item here for an annual contract increase with Veolia and aggregate adjustments for various accounts. Capital outlay, it reflects an increase based on asset assessment using the criteria for criticality and condition. Capital outlay funding is requested to rehabilitate, repair, or replace various assets to ensure continuous and efficient operation of the water plant. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 21-22 amended budget of $3.9 million to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $4.6 million. Making sure no questions thus far. Wastewater treatment plant. Again, personal services. Because the wastewater treatment plant is operated under contract, the budget does not contain a personal services category. The employees who operate the plant are employed by Jacobs. Capital outlay. Funding requirements for machinery and equipment has been reduced for this fiscal year.
Oh. We have a question from Member Moulton.
Yes.
Yes, hi. This is actually on the water treatment plant FTE. I see that it's listed as all being contracted employees, and so is the expense for that listed there in the professional and technical services instead of salaries?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And when we're looking at, say, an overall FTE count for all of the city, is this contracted FTE included within that?
It is not.
Okay. How many, are there very many areas within the budget that have contracted employees?
Well, we contract out for a lot of...
Brian.
Oh. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, we contract out our sewer and water plant operations. We contract out some landscaping of our medians, and we contract out street sweeping. So those are the primary areas that we contract out.
Okay.
Please.
Thank you.
Any other questions at this time? Okay. So returning to wastewater treatment, beginning with the fiscal year 21-22 budget of $2.1 million, ending with the fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of $3 million. Wastewater collection and industrial pretreatment. Going forward, we are combining these two departments. Materials and services, aggregate adjustments here. Capital outlay due to supply chain delays. We're funding the single axle vacuum jetting truck in the next fiscal year, as Keith mentioned earlier. Moving from fiscal year 21-22 budget of 1.3 million, no change in FTE, to a fiscal year 22-23 budget of 1.4 million. Stormwater maintenance, no change in FTE. Overall increase of only 3%, comprised in part of small ancillary changes. Capital outlay, again here, due to supply chain delays, funding for the single axle vacuum jetting truck has been moved to fiscal year 22-23. In total, bringing them from a fiscal year 22-23 amended budget of 1.1 million to a fiscal year 22-23 proposed budget of 1.2 million. And that concludes Public Works. I'll then turn it to Keith for Transportation.
Sure, and I think we have Dwight Brashear on the line via remote. Mr. Brashear?
All right, thank you, Keith. Good evening, Budget Committee members. My name is Dwight Brashear. I am the Transit Director and proud Transit Director for Smart Fleet. We are two departments in one, and we are responsible for the providing public transit throughout Wilsonville and the surrounding areas. We are also the fleet department, and so not only does the fleet department maintain a fleet of about 32, 33 transit vehicles, there are about 300 other pieces of equipment that the fleet department, city-owned equipment that the fleet department maintains and does a really good job. I joined the Smart Fleet team back in 2017, and I think it's important to note that back in 2017, when I joined this particular agency, we financially were on what the city likes to call the watch list. We were headed off a cliff, becoming insolvent in a very, very meaningful way, if you will. And that was the last time we were on the watch list, was 2017. And so these things don't happen by chance. They don't happen by accident. They happen because we are deliberate, and because I'm not the smartest person in the room, I never want to be. I did bring some smart people with me. I have, and that's pardon the pun, I have Eric Loomis, who is our operations manager. He's there in the chamber. I have Scott Simonton, who is our fleet manager. He's also in the chamber. And then I think joining me remotely is Kelsey Lewis, and Kelsey does an excellent job of managing our grants and programs. So that's kind of Smart Fleet in a nutshell there. But I am very proud to lead this team. Some of the things that we're looking at as we look forward, expanded bus service, bus on shoulder service on the I-205, and this is an exciting project. The mayor and others have probably heard about it in their travels, but the city of Wilsonville, through SMART, the city or counties of Washington and Clackamas have partnered together, identified funding, and so we're hoping, buses being the unknown. You heard a little bit about delivery schedules, and Scott is here, and he can talk a little bit more about that. But this is a very exciting project that the state, primarily through the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, will fund, and we hope to have access to the I-205 shoulder, much like we do right now on the I-5 5 shoulder between Wilsonville and Tualatin. So we're really excited to kick that off. I think there's 2.25 FTEs needed for that service and 4 brand new CNG compressed natural gas. I don't want to get hung up on the acronyms, compressed natural gas powered vehicles. So they're much cleaner than diesel or gasoline would be. We just kicked off a book on bus collaboration with our public library. And so what that looks like is we set up a bus to look just like a library inside with shelves and all the books any young, old, or any other age person would want. You can see a picture there of 2 young individuals that went shopping for books on our bus. We actually take the buses to some of the apartment complexes around. We're looking at senior centers. I've even had an offer for Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. And these books are purchased for this particular program. They are identified as being from this program. And I think the really neat thing is that the person checking out the book can share the book with someone else. They can keep the book, or they can return the book to the bus or to the library, and the bus will find it, the book will find its way back to the Book on Bus program. So we're really excited about this program and looking to expand upon it. Transit Master Plan update. Back in 2017 when I arrived, I walked right into a Master Plan update. We got that plan across the finish line being we have to get it through the Planning Commission and then ultimately the City Council. And this is a huge lift for SMART, and we hire a consultant this time. We didn't last time, and we should have, but we didn't. And we do a massive public outreach to figure out exactly what SMART needs to look like moving forward. And we realize that travel patterns have changed. There's a lot of work from home going on. And one of the things that SMART prides itself in is being nimble. And that's extremely important. If you look at transit agencies across this state, the one thing that they have in common is that they are not nimble. And it doesn't matter their size, but we are and pride ourselves in being extremely nimble to be able to adjust to the changing patterns, and whether it's working directly with our employers, working with our residents. It's important that we know what they want us to be, and so we listen very closely. Vanpool Program, another new program funded through a state grant working with Enterprise Rental Car. We are working with our employers. A lot of the larger employers are really interested in this program. We're looking to start off with about 6 vans, and this program is really close to kicking off, and Kelsey can answer more questions about the Vanpool program if you have them, but we're excited to bring the Vanpool program to Wilsonville. And then one of the things I think in my entire career that I'm extremely proud of, and I've had a lot of things go right in my career, but this transit-oriented development project that we're working with community development on will bring much-needed affordable housing to the Wilsonville area, and specifically to the transit center, giving residents access to not only social services, wraparound services there on the first floor, which I think someone mentioned earlier, a $1.9 million grant was awarded to the city of Wilsonville for building out that first floor. On that first floor, among other things, will be a regional transit customer service center. And my hope is that SMART City of Wilsonville will start providing customer service and ride information for the entire region. And so if someone needs bus information in Canby, they would call one number and we would answer that call and give them that information through a partnership with the other transit agencies in Clackamas County. So everyone would pay into those services. So we're extremely excited about that project, and it looks like 22-23 we'll be able to kick that project off. So. All right, and so just to kind of talk a little bit about how we fund a lot of our projects. The Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, as Keith mentioned, is a 0.1% on employee payroll, so we're all paying into that. It generates about $1.5 million annually. And we look at a biannual plan, so we're looking at about $3 million over the 2 years that will come directly to SMART. And the only kicker there is that we have to use it on expanding service or enhancing service, that type of thing. It can't be used to supplant the funding that has already been coming in for the services that we already provide. And so it has worked out really well for us. We also use it to match federal grants. SMART has the honor, if you will, of being a direct recipient of the federal government. So a lot of the smaller transit agencies go through ODOT for their funding. And we are accountable to the federal government, which means there is a few more hoops that we have to jump through. But when you're looking at some of the special funding that came through, the ARPA was mentioned earlier, we get our money directly from the federal government, and so it is in no way competitive at that level. Now, there are other grants that do become very, very competitive, and we've done a very good job. Our electric buses that you have seen operating around Wilsonville came through competitive grants, and so we have to prove that we have not only the know-how to pull something like this off, but we have the financial wherewithal to do it as well. And so we are one of, I'm very proud, we are one of two, according to ODOT, one of two transit operations in the entire state of Oregon that actually operates in the black. And that they're saying, you know, that's saying something. Bus and bus stop technology upgrades, we have a $198,000 STIF discretionary grant, Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund discretionary grant. So we are going to look at bus shelters, and then we have 13-inch what we call paper readers. And so if you're standing at a bus stop somewhere here in Wilsonville, there's one at Sherry's bus stop right now. It'll actually give you departure and arrival times. Very nice technology, especially for a city our size. And that requires a $49,000 match. The Transit Master Plan, which I mentioned, is also grant funded, $112,000 from the state, and we will use STIF. If you look at the next, that's the beauty of the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. So we're getting a Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund grant for $112,000. And we're going to use $88,000 of our formula Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund to match it. So the bottom line cost on that particular deal to the city and to SMART is zero. Vehicle replacement is always going on at SMART, and so we've got $127,000. That's usually about one vehicle. And then, of course, we can use the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund, $31,000 to match that $127,000 grant. Design of facility expansion. We have a beautiful facility located on Bollberg where we park all of our buses. We fuel all of the equipment for the city, and it houses our administration building as well. All of our drivers operate out of that facility, and that facility was built, I believe, back in 2010, around that time frame, and here it is, 2022, and we've already, I say already, that's a number of years, but we've outgrown it. There are some things that we need to do in order to make it a little bit more comfortable for all of us that work out of that facility. So for the design portion of the facility, we have a $206,000 federal grant, and we'll match that with $51,000 of local funding. And so you can see the grants, whether they're state grants or federal grants, are the life's blood of any transit operation, and they have proven to be very, very valuable for a smart fleet. I think that's the last, that's my last slide. And like I said, I do have my team with me, and we should be able to answer just about any question that you might have about transit or fleet.
We have a question from Member Russell.
Hello. So I was wondering about the Bus on the Shoulder program. It seems like, so they started doing some sort of construction on, I think it's I-5 South, near where 205 meets, and it looked like they had blocked off part of the shoulder. Does that affect that shoulder route? Because it seemed like that started shortly after the Bus on the Shoulder program started.
Very, very observant, yes. That did start shortly after we got access or gained access to the shoulder. We had a meeting now probably about a month ago or so, maybe a little over a month ago, with ODOT to express our discontent for what happened. And we got a meeting with a couple of the very high up ODOT folks, and we have a great relationship with ODOT. I mean, they were a great partner on this. And I described it as, I said, you gave us a toy, and we love the toy. And then you placed the toy on the shelf, out of reach, and all we can now do is stand there and stare up at the toy. And they agreed. They said, Dwight, you're absolutely right. We're sorry. And they have since worked with this particular contractor. And if you've been through there lately, they have moved the Jersey barriers over, and we once again have access to that shoulder. But it was one of the most important pieces of that project. I think it was one of the largest sections of shoulder coming south on the I-5. But yeah, they kicked us out of there for, I don't know how long it was, Eric, but they kicked us out of there for at least a few weeks before we cried foul, and they let us back in. Yeah.
We have a question from Member O'Neill.
I want to it's more of a comment. I just think that you've done a superb job in your department, and it's amazing the transition that SMART has done over the years since we moved here after 14 years. I have one quick question, though. It's kind of self-serving, but it was such a great outreach. You had a streetcar once. I thought it fell within the realm of SMART, and I think it may have broken down or something, but it was such a great outreach for kids. Or is it, we don't see it. What's the update? Because I know kids just loved it. It was a great thing for families, and just curious.
Well, we appreciate that very much, and we loved our trolley, which looked like it was a streetcar replica, San Francisco streetcar replica. It is still with us. It is 21, 22 years old. Scott is in the chamber there, and he can help me with this. But Scott, can you come up and just tell briefly what your team is working on as far as the trolley is concerned? There he is.
So I'm Scott Simonton. I'm the city's fleet manager. The trolley it's 22 years old. It's beyond what we would consider to be its useful life, but we have kept it operational as best we can. There's a lot of wood damage to it. It's basically in need of a complete refurbishment. We attempted to buy a replacement trolley about 2 years ago, but the supply issues that you've heard about, earlier tonight as far as difficulty in vehicle lead times, we had a contract to purchase one. The company was eventually unable to supply that vehicle, so we had to kind of start over. So we're still looking at some other grant opportunities to purchase a replacement trolley, but in the meantime, my staff is working on trying to refurbish that wood as best we can to get that back out there at some point.
Thank you. It was a treat. Thank you for providing that input.
Well, thank you for noticing that we had it at one time and it hasn't been out in a while. And I think I'm not putting any pressure on Scott at all. He knows that, but we're hoping to see it this summer, before the summer's over sometime. But he's got a great team in there. I walk out there frequently, and it's in the shop there, and they're sanding away on it, trying to get it back into shape, because it is part of the city, but it's a part of our image as well. And I want to make sure we're putting the best we can out there. So it's important.
Question from member Linville.
Thank you. Mr. Brashear, I wanted to just echo the comments by Member O'Neill in terms of the operation of our SMART program, and I just wanted to clarify for maybe for our members and for our citizens that one of the big benefits, I think, for our community of having SMART here, in addition to the level of service that is provided to our community, is the savings for our employers on their employment tax. Because if TriMet was here in our community, they would be charging our employers, I believe, with the increase that's going into effect this next fiscal year, 0.7937%. And we have been holding it at 0.5, and so that is really a savings as well for our employers. And so I wanted to just commend SMART as well for helping our businesses with their employment tax as well.
Well, thank you, Counselor. You are absolutely right, and we have maintained one of, if not the lowest, payroll tax in the Tri-County area, and we're very, very proud of that. I got a great team. That's all I can say. I'm not, like I said, I'm not the smartest guy in the room, but I certainly surround myself with those that are the smartest folks in the room, and they never have once let me down, let the city down. And, we are ranked and have been ranked for the 5 years that I've been here, one of the top 10 transit agencies in a national survey. We usually finish well within the top 10. I think we were number 5 last year in one category and 10th in the other. So to say we have a top 10 transit agency in this country says a lot. It really, really does. So, great city.
Member Fitzgerald.
Thank you. I just had another glowing comment to this little string and point out that I go to have the opportunity to go to many meetings with mayors and some of the other counselors do too, and these county meetings with both Washington and Clackamas County. And we should all know that our transit team, led by Mr. Brashear and all of his team, are well known around the area for their collaboration with other small transit providers. And Mr. Bashir formed I guess it's a little contact group, and they meet periodically, and they talk about great ways to make their transit systems work better, the way they can integrate the transit systems together. They work with ODOT. It's just amazing. There are challenges, and they're always working on them. So if you have a chance to take a day and ride the transit, and if there's ever a tour of SMART, it really is a great thing to do with kids too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. And I forgot to mention, I ride our transit system every day to and from work, and I absolutely love it. So I just, stick my tongue out at the gas prices as they go up, because it matters not to me. But yeah, no, I do. I ride to and from work every day. So, and I love the other small providers of Clackamas County. And you're right, we meet we call it a coalition of sorts, yeah. And we meet every Wednesday at 1 o'clock and have for the last 3 or 4 years. And we've got projects. The one that we're working on right now is an integrated website for all of the providers. So one-stop shopping for customers if you're looking for anything transit related. Now, we have our own website and we'll maintain that, but we will have a website together that will give a customer all the information that they need. So, yeah.
Member Russell?
I have another question. I'm talking about the Vanpool program. I wanted to reiterate what everyone else is saying. I'm quite the avid user of the smart buses, so I love them. But on the Vanpool program, I'm not sure what the progress of that is, but is there any consideration being given to like hybrid or electric vehicles over gas?
And I don't know if, is Kelsey on? Has she been promoted? If not, I can take that. She's leading that program. All right, I don't see her, and if not. As I explained, we're working with Enterprise, so our partner on this is Enterprise, and then of course the partners beyond that are the employers in Wilsonville. We, as SMART, are always looking for opportunities to transition the fleet that we operate to alternative fuels, and we have a goal of 2028. Compared to, I think TriMet is looking at about 2040 to 2050 to transition their entire fleet. And so we are on a fast track to do that. And so there may be opportunities with these vans. We'll have to, figure out what is available now. There are some opportunities for electric vehicles that we would like to take advantage of. The bus that you see on my shoulder, which is a bus on the shoulder there, we want to try to get some of those in electric buses. And the market right now just hasn't really opened up enough for that to happen. So we are constantly scanning the market. Scott is very, very good at identifying those opportunities and bringing them to us. So I would answer the question, yes. I think there are opportunities to operate electric vans, renewable natural gas vans, that type of thing on that service. So if we have any input, we will certainly put pressure on Enterprise to make that happen.
Can you hear me? I can give a little bit more context.
Oh, good.
Kelsey Lewis, I'm the Grants and Programs Manager at SMART. The Vanpool program is, as Dwight said, through Commute with Enterprise, which is the same enterprise you're probably familiar with as a rental car company, and they operate very similarly with their Vanpool program. So a Vanpool participant, a group who decides to come together and do a Vanpool, can choose their vehicle. So That's a great question. I don't know if they offer electric vehicles as one of their options. I suspect that they probably offer hybrids, but the Vanpool group can choose the vehicle that they want to travel in, and I think I'm curious, so I will definitely follow up and see what options we have available for alternative fueled vehicles. Thanks for the question.
Any other questions? Okay.
So we can move on to the budget specifics. And one other feather for the smart transit, and Dwight can add on a little bit more to this, because we were talking about audits earlier in the evening. The Smart Transit Agency is subject, because we are an FTA direct recipient, to a 3-year comprehensive audit where the FTA will come down and review all the policies, the procedures, the financials of the Smart Agency. And the last audit, just last year, I believe, Dwight, they found 0 occurrences of any concern. Is that, did I phrase that right?
That is, yeah, there were no findings at all, and that is the first time in the over 3 decades that I've been running transit across the country that has ever happened. I thought about retiring because you want to go out on a high note, but we'll hang in there. We can do it again, but it rarely ever happens in transit, because there's always something, and to go through a 3-year extensive audit, they audit 3 years worth of purchases and funding, and to find nothing was incredible. Again, I can't take credit for it. The team did a great job, did an excellent job, including yourself, Keith. So every department, that audit touches pretty much every department, and everybody stepped up, and so we ended up looking really good, but there were a lot of folks involved in that. But thank you for bringing that up. I forgot about that.
I always like talking about a good audit. So this department's budget goes from 8.5 to 8.9 million, and then just kind of one overriding fact just to remember is these expenses are not going to, most of these expenses will not happen unless we have the grant funding in line, and we're in line for $2 million of federal funding, as well as all the STIF funding that Dwight mentioned. We also get a little bit of county funding for the SMART program, as well as the local transit tax that we have locally. So we're looking at some salary and benefit adjustments. They have an overall $5 million personnel budget, not particularly deviating from that. And we'll have an increase in professional technical services of $360,000. That is, a large chunk of that is the transit master plan. That is grant covered. There's some increases for natural gas because there's conversion. We have a hybrid of vehicles there, some with CNG. We have the electric, and then we still have some gas-based vehicles. And then we have various increases in other areas, including fleet services, which includes the expanded service that they are incurring. That includes all the fuel, the oil changes that are anticipated to go up. And for the ad packages, that represents the additional FTE. That represents that route through Clackamas County, or up to Clackamas County. I think it's up to the Clackamas County Mall area, and that will be covered by STIF funding as well. So to the extent the timing of that is still uncertain, but that ad package is primarily covered through the STIF funding. So we'll start the year with 44.13 FTEs and end the proposed budget with 46.38. So the fund and the department is looking very good. Of course, under the transportation umbrella is the fleet department. The majority of the fleet department's time here is spent, of course, on transit, as well as, though we have really large equipment and vehicles in terms of our Parks and Recreation Department and facilities. So other departments are assessed a fleet charge as well as transit. And there has been a growing need, and that's why we see the addition of a service worker for an ad package here to this department. And it will go from a $1.5 million budget to a $1.8 million budget. What's embedded in there as well, as you'll see in materials and services, is the expected or anticipated, and we're largely living it, increases in fuel costs. So we budgeted an additional $100,000. That may be a little over, hard to say. I heard in some gas stations now they're changing their reader boards so they can accommodate $10 per gallon fuel. So we'll see what the future holds for that. But they are proposing an additional service worker addition of 1.0. So we're going to look at a little bit of the 5-year forecast of transit, and this is also in the appendix section of the budget book. And you can see, in general, the revenues and expenses over time really just align. We're not going to, we're basically only spending what we get in grant funding, so they're pretty much in parallel tandem over the course of the next 5 years, well above the required financial policy minimum for the fund, and healthy with a healthy base of reserves for the fund. So the fund's looking really good. And that wraps up, unless there's any specific further questions for transit or really any of the departments, or those can be held over till tomorrow as well. So I'll turn it back over to the chair, who will recess the meeting if there's no further questions. Or
we'll need a motion to continue the meeting to tomorrow night at 6 p.m.
Okay, I would like to seek a motion to recess and continue tomorrow starting at 6 p.m.
Mr. Chair, Sean O'Neill, so moved.
Do I hear, could I get a second?
I'll second that.
All in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye. This meeting is adjourned till May 19th at 6 p.m. Thank you.
Aye.